Did you start it, Andre? So my first visit to Saint Marjorie, yes, Marjorie's church, St. Mary's Primrose Hill, was in January 2015. It was absolutely, she told us, it was with a group of people who inquired, discerning the vocation, and I was sent there because I was told that they have a school. So that was the reason. I mean, well, they didn't have much engagement with the school, but that was a wonderful place to go back over and over again, and which I did. Two years later, I met David, whom I remember. It was a memorable meal that he served me that evening, and many other meals that they offer over the years, and hospitality. Wonderful hospitality. It's inspiring friendship, inspiring a place to be, both in the household and the church. There was a family member who couldn't come today to be with us, but I absolutely want to greet from afar. Is my friend Batman. They used to have three cats. At least only Batman left. Never mind. He's the best one. He's the best one, and he's. He's sitting on my bed. He will come to sleep with me at night. They will bring me toys. Wonderful friendship with Batman and Marjorie and David. So thank you for being here. I'm sitting here if there's technical glitches.
She's my technical backup. And thank you, Andre, for fixing it all up for me. Right, and thank you, so many of you, for staying behind to hear me give this little talk. If you studied the Canterbury Tales at school, I'm sure you'll remember that the prologue opens with a description of the season of spring. And it says that at that season, "Then longen folk to go on pilgrimages." And spring makes you want to go on pilgrimage. Well, it seems that in the 21st century, more and more folk of all kinds, religious and non-religious, long to go on pilgrimages once again, after centuries of declining interest. And I wonder why that is. I've got a few theories. One is that everything is so instantly attainable in this digital age. You can find an image of a place or the answer to almost any question at the click of a key, that something that takes real effort has the value of novelty. To arrive somewhere after weeks of foot slogging instead of stepping off a plane or out of a car gives us a different perspective and perhaps a deeper appreciation of a place. But it's not all about arriving somewhere. For many pilgrims, the walk itself is the main event. A saying that you often hear as a pilgrim is, "The journey is the destination." The journey is the destination. So what really matters, what really changes you, isn't so much arriving at a shrine or a church or some other holy place, but the very un-21st century experience of putting your boots on every day, picking up your backpack with all your worldly goods, and setting off in all weathers to find shelter for the next night, no matter how footsore you are from the previous day's walking. And I think that for many people, a pilgrimage provides an opportunity to think about what I spoke about earlier, the one thing needful that we may feel is missing from our life, or the one thing we know is most important, but it's been neglected and pushed aside. People may go on a pilgrimage to test their endurance, to escape for a while from some unhappiness in daily life, to find a new direction. Sometimes pilgrims are grieving a death or the end of a relationship or losing a job. Sometimes they're just curious and looking for an adventure. And sometimes they're really searching for the one thing needful. Nearly 20 years ago, I was very fortunate to be given a double allowance of holiday from my job as a parish priest in Hackney. And I decided to walk the Camino to Santiago de Compostela in northern Spain. And I went with my daughter, Alison, who had just graduated from university. It's a pilgrim route that you probably know was hugely popular in the Middle Ages. That was at a time when Jerusalem was in unfriendly hands and traveling to Rome across the Alps was very dangerous because of all the bandits. And it was a bit safer especially from Britain, to take a ship and go to northern Spain and then walk a few hundred kilometers to Santiago, reputed to be the burial place of St. James the Apostle. I know St. Mary Magdalene came here, and St. James went there. We won't go into too much detail about the historicity of those things, but they were very deeply treasured legends, and the burial place at St. James was a hugely important pilgrimage site for hundreds and hundreds of years. People may have come by boat from Britain, but many people from France, from Germany, from the Low Countries, and also from England went on the traditional routes that started in different parts of France, as you may well know, and they converge on a little town called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, just over the Pyrenees into France from Spain. And the first day you go up and over the mountains and into the pilgrim center of Roncesvalles. And it was at Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port that Alison and I decided to start our pilgrimage. And here we are setting off from, you can see it says the vicarage, so it proves we're at the front door of the vicarage in Hackney. I will apologize right at the beginning for the quality of photos. This was way before smartphones, so we had a little Kodak camera with, the kind of film that you had to send off to Boots. So they're rather fuzzy, but much treasured images for me about the pilgrimage. So why did we go? For me, it was a mixture of needing a break from the parish, longing for a retreat from daily life, a sense of curiosity and adventure. I had no idea what to expect from it, but several of my friends had really raved about the Camino to me, and my interest was piqued. It was really growing in popularity at that time, 2005. And I wanted to be a part of this centuries-long tradition. The Camino had fallen into a state of neglect for many decades, but late in the 20th century, it began to grow in popularity with people of all ages, all nationalities, and all beliefs. And I wanted to find out what made it such a magnet. For my daughter, it was an adventure just before she set off on her gap year travels around Asia with her boyfriend. And it was a chance for the two of us to form an adult relationship after all the turmoil of the teenage years. And it was a great success on all of these counts. But it ended up changing her life forever. She loved the Camino so much that she returned several times to do stretches of it with friends. And through those encounters, she fell in love with Spain, and later she fell in love with a Spaniard. And for the past 7 years, she has lived in Andalusia with him and their little boy. So we set off over the mountains from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port to Spain. And this is us going up over the Pyrenees. And on the other side, we reached a welcome center for pilgrims in Roncesvalles, where people slept in a large dormitory. It was quite a shock to realize that you're going to be sleeping in bunk beds, cheek by jowl with people, didn't matter what gender, what nationality, right next to you in a great big room. But people slept in this dormitory and also reconsidered the weight of their backpacks, having carried it over the Pyrenees. They thought again about what they needed to have on the journey. So there were shelves where you could offload all the things that you didn't really need and pick them up if you needed them. We gathered the next morning to sing the Salve Regina and to receive a blessing for our journey. And then we were on our way on the historic Camino Frances. There are a number of Caminos in northern Spain, but the traditional one is the Camino Frances. And so it began. We passed a number of monuments and statues and pictures and so on that were erected to encourage us. This was taken, as you can see, on a somewhat rainy day, and we needed a bit of encouragement, a pilgrim marching ahead to lead us on. In one little village, we stumbled, a place called Viana, we stumbled across a fiesta. And in northern Spain, or any part of Spain, a fiesta is going to involve some bull running. And so people were very casual about it. At the last moment, they stepped up behind the wooden barriers into their doorways, and down the street came the bulls. And I caught a picture of this one going by. This was followed by a huge meal on long trestle tables. The whole village was eating together, and you can see some of them wearing their red scarves. That was the sign they were in fiesta for their particular local virgin's feast day. But it was a lovely flavor of Spain. All along the way, we looked out for those yellow arrows that marked the path. We had guidebooks and maps, but the yellow arrows always showed us we were on the right track. And this one came with an inspirational poem. I don't think you can probably read the words from the picture, and of course they're in Spanish. But my daughter has translated this little poem for me, and it says, "Dust, mud, sun, and rain is the Camino del Santiago. Thousands of pilgrims, and more than 1,000 years. Pilgrim, who calls you? What hidden force attracts you? Not the field of stars, nor the grand cathedrals. It's not the brave Navarra, nor the wine of the Riojans, nor the Galician seafood, nor the Castilian fields. Pilgrim, who calls you? What hidden force attracts you? Not the people of the Camino, nor the rural customs. It's not the history and culture, nor the cockerel of La Alcazaba, nor the Gaudi Palace, nor the Ponferrada Castle. I see all of it passing by, and it's a joy to see everything. Even more is the voice that calls me. I feel it deeply inside. The force that pushes me, the force that attracts me, not even I can explain. Only he in the heavens knows." I think many of the people I met along the way would resonate with that. Something was pulling or pushing them. They couldn't quite say what, but they felt it deeply. All along the way, pilgrims would pile little stones on top of other stones, make little cairns, which were a lovely sign that other people had passed by, and there are thousands on the same route. And so we would add our stones too. And the Camino Frances falls roughly into 3 parts. We took about nearly 6 weeks to walk it, going quite gently because of Alison could have done it in half the time, but I couldn't. First, you have a couple of weeks walking through some very rich countryside of the Basque country and Rioja region and Navarra, where people were harvesting grapes. We were going there in September, so that was rather nice because they often gave a free glass of wine to a passing pilgrim. And then there was a 2-week stretch of the high, empty meseta. And a lot of pilgrims who had limited time would skip that. They'd get a bus and cross the meseta to the last stretch. But we had the time to do it, and I'm so glad we did, because in many ways it was the most powerful part of the journey. But this is me sitting on the meseta. And then the last stretch was Astorga and then Galicia, the magical woodlands of Galicia, an extraordinary place, where the numbers of pilgrims swelled because many people came to join to walk just the last 100 kilometers, which would be enough to entitle them to get a certificate of completion, a Compostela, when they got to Santiago. This was staying in an albergue, one of the refugios, the stopping places for the pilgrims, which all along the route would welcome you in. And this was a particularly lovely one because the woman who ran it took very tender care of pilgrims. She would, wash people's feet and bandage them if they had blisters and so on, and cooked us a lovely meal and gave us lots of tips. And she had her wall covered with all the memorabilia of her many pilgrimages. She'd done about 30 Caminos herself, and all her Compostelas were up there. This was my favorite place. This was in the middle of the meseta, and it was an albergue run by a group of Italian volunteers, and there was no electricity in it. It was just lit by candlelight. They did have a separate shower block where you could get some hot water and have a shower and brush your teeth with the light on, but the main building was just candlelit. And as we were welcomed there, and you can see it's a very old building, it was welcoming pilgrims in the Middle Ages, we sat in a semicircle in a little chapel, and our feet were washed ceremoniously. We worked together to cook a meal and ate it by candlelight, and then we slept under a blanket of darkness. Wonderful, wonderful deep sleep and silence and darkness at the far end of the building. And then in the morning, we stood in a circle, and the hospitalero said a prayer of blessing for us as we made ready to go on our journey. It was a truly wonderful spot. All along the way, of course, we passed many churches, and most of them, I'm very sorry to say, were locked all the time. The Spanish church was missing a tremendous opportunity. People were walking by, very willing to pause and reflect, but the churches were usually locked. But they made good bases for storks' nests, and you can see storks have been busy on this one. Every day we had different traveling companions, but we often met up with same groups of people in the evening, the ones who walked at the same pace we did. So we'd get to know people over a period of days. But the two companions who never failed us were our shadows. We named them and greeted them every morning. You can see how long and thin they are because we got started at daybreak or before daybreak every day. It was important to walk in the coolest part of the day to get to our destination by early afternoon so that we could have a meal, wash our clothes, take a siesta, and rest up before starting early again on the next morning. This was one of the important stopping places on the Camino. It's called the Cruz de Fierro, and it's a place where every year pilgrims make a mountain of stones, and every year it's cleared away and a new one is made. It was the place where traditionally pilgrims would carry a stone from home, all the way from home, and then lay it down at this point. And it represented the burdens you were laying down, the sins you were repenting of, whatever your concerns were. In the Middle Ages, it was very important to make a pilgrimage because it guaranteed you entry into heaven and forgiveness of sins. But most people, of course, couldn't leave their work in the fields, and they didn't have the money and the time and the fitness to go on a pilgrimage. So a village would often commission one person to take the sins of the whole village on their shoulders and make the Camino on their behalf. And at this point, he would lay them down at the hillside. You can notice a slightly eerie light in this picture, I hope, and that's because there was a partial eclipse of the sun the day we went there, which just added to the kind of otherworldliness of this particular day. Our way took us past Templar castles. They were built in the Middle Ages to defend pilgrims against, bandits, but also it was part of the ongoing warfare between the Catholics and the Muslims. Sadly, there's still some enmity, some problems in that field in Spain. There were three kinds of pictures of St. James, three sorts of iconography as you went along. One of them showed him seated and teaching as an apostle, and that's what you see when you get to Compostela. One that is really lovely and you see often, and in fact I saw it yesterday in Aix-en-Provence, is St. James as a pilgrim to his own shrine. So he's got a staff and a gourd for his water and a pilgrim's hat with a shell in it to show that he's a pilgrim. That was a very encouraging sign. The third depiction of St. James you often saw was St. James on horseback, Santiago Matamoros, killing some Muslim soldier on the ground. So that wasn't a particularly happy image, but a sad reminder of the misunderstanding that has been going on for centuries between Christians and Muslims in some parts of the world. We took every opportunity to put our feet into the stream. The feet got very sore. In fact, water was a real theme of the Camino. We would fill our water bottle at every fountain we went to. And it's lovely that in Spain, the water in public places is always fit to drink. So we would just fill it up. There were fountains everywhere for pilgrims to use. And it became a pressing concern never to run out of water. So you never wanted to get to the end of the day with an empty water bottle because that was quite terrifying. So every day we made sure we kept refilling it as we went along. And we began to learn how important it is to just depend on this gift of water to sustain our lives. We got to Galicia with the last bit of the journey, which is, again, farmland, lots of woodland. We just quite like this particular pig. She looks very small in the picture, but she was an enormous sow, absolutely enormous, and she came barreling across the field as we went by and stuck her nose out to see what we might be able to give her to eat. And so we quickly handed her a donut that we had, and she snaffled it up in one quick go. But there were a lot of pigs in Galicia. There were also a lot of granaries, and they were all up on stilts like this one to save the grain from the rats. And they looked like little chapels almost, because they very often, almost always, had a cross on them, a little sign of piety. So at last, after 6 weeks of walking, we reached our physical destination, the Cathedral of Santiago. And I can still remember how we walked through town, holding hands and weeping. It was powerfully emotional to get there. In a way, we were just so sad to be at the end of our journey and also so excited about seeing where we were going to end up, that it was a very strong day. But by the time we got here, we were smiling in our photos. We were so pleased with ourselves for having made it. 780 kilometers. And when you get to Santiago, you do the traditional things. You touch the foot of the seated saint on the way in. You go up behind a statue of the saint and put your arms around him. And you go down to the crypt where he's reputedly buried. And that's the place where people go with their intentions that they took with them on the journey, the prayers that you've promised to say for people, or whatever it is you're seeking, you want to ask for some guidance. Again, a very powerful moment just to be in that place. Whether or not the saint is there, in a way, doesn't matter a bit, because it's a place where for 1,000 years, so many people have come and prayed. And then you go to the pilgrim office, show your pilgrim passport, which has been stamped at every refugio you stopped at, and get your Compostela, written in Latin, which shows that you have made the pilgrimage. And then you go to the pilgrim mass in the cathedral. And we were so fortunate, it was purely fortuitous, that the day we were there for the pilgrim mass was the feast day of St. Teresa of Avila. In fact, it's in 2 days' time. We arrived there in October, middle of October. And so because it was a feast day, the botufamiro was in use. It's not in use every day. And this is a huge pot of coal on which buckets of incense are poured, and it's on great big chains up into the ceiling, and it takes about 8 men to set it swinging. And I'm sure it was swung in the Middle Ages just to cover the smell of the pilgrims, because they must have been a pretty smelly lot by the time they arrived, often running in excitement at the last bit. But it swung through the transepts, and there it is overhead. And you think, it's only centrifugal force that's keeping all that burning coal in there. But it was just exhilarating. And a nun sang a solo song of praise as it went flying through the cathedral. And it just was the crowning moment of the pilgrimage. So, back home, we were proud to hang up our Compostelas. There's mine. And the cockle shells that we wore on our backpack to show that we were pilgrims, and we often retreated as such, given treats and so on, and a very friendly welcome along the way. Alison has gone on to earn several Compostelas now, but I'm very content with my one. I'm very pleased I've got it. But that pilgrimage was the beginning and not the end of my interest in pilgrimage. And I'm now very fortunate to live with David, my husband, near St. Albans Cathedral, just a few minutes' walk away. And this is the cathedral. It claims to be, and I believe it is, the earliest site of continuous Christian worship in Britain. It goes back, its origins are from about the year 300. There was a Roman Briton named Alban who opened his door one day to a priest who was fleeing persecution. And gave him refuge. And during their conversations, Alban's heart was moved by hearing the gospel from this priest, and he embraced the Christian faith. And a few days later, the authorities came looking for the priest, and Alban changed clothes with his visitor and presented himself as the priest they were looking for. And in front of the magistrate, he declared his faith in the true and living God who created all things. And because of his refusal to burn incense in front of the image of the emperor, he was condemned to death and was beheaded on the hill above the Roman town of Verulamium. And that's where the hill is where the cathedral is now. It very quickly became a place of pilgrimage, a magnet to the place where the first martyr in Britain had died. And this is Alban's image. He carries a cross with a circle on top as his particular sign. And in the Middle Ages, a very large and rich Benedictine abbey grew up on the spot. And the pilgrimage to the shrine of St. Alban was very popular and very lucrative. And again, people who couldn't travel as far as Santiago or Rome or Jerusalem would come to the cathedral at the Abbey of St. Albans. After the dissolution of the monasteries, the church fell into disrepair until the 19th century philanthropist paid for it to be restored, and then it became this seat of a new diocese, the Diocese of St. Albans, only as recently as the 1870s. But this is the heart of the cathedral. This is the shrine of St. Alban the Martyr. The shrine was completely broken up at the Reformation, but the pieces were discovered when they were doing this restoration in the 19th century. It was painstakingly put back together. And then to cap it all, the Cathedral of Cologne in Germany offered a little shred of St. Alban's shoulder bone because apparently his relics had been taken to the continent for safekeeping, and they'd held them ever since, and they gave St. Alban's Abbey back a little bit of his body. So we do actually have a proper shrine with a bit of a saint in it, and it's venerated from time to time by people who find that sort of thing very helpful. But the shrine itself is a wonderful place of prayer. And there's a little shrine next to it, which is the shrine of the priest who changed clothes with Alban, St. Amphibolus, who went on to be martyred himself after some further years of ministry. And the cathedral's vision, its tagline, is following Christ in Alban's footsteps. So it sets the pilgrim theme right at the heart of its vision. The idea of being on a journey is central to the identity of the cathedral. And every visitor is welcomed as a potential pilgrim, whether they think of themselves that way or not. They are able to pick up a pilgrim passport and a pilgrim badge, get their passport stamped. The great annual festival on St. Alban's Day in June is marked by a colourful procession through the streets of the city to the west door of the cathedral. And this is what's happening in this picture. With giant puppets. This is St. Alban in the front. You can see an eyeball further down, perhaps. Apparently the executioner's eyeballs fell out when he executed the martyr. And so the children love this. They have two great eyeballs on sticks that go in the procession. The clergy walk along. I'm in the middle of that picture. There's the priest, Amphibolus, coming along behind, and others further back. It's a real carnival, and the centerpiece of it is retelling the story of St. Alban over the loudspeakers in the center of town. So great gathering of people just accidentally watching what's going on. And the story says that St. Alban prayed for a spring of water on his way to execution. And of course, the spring of water came up at once at his prayer. And so the local fire brigade come and they set off a great big hose full of water spraying up into the sky and getting the crowd all wet. And everybody loves that, to remember that moment in the story. And there are still more of the puppets coming along to the cathedral. People arrive, have a great festival Eucharist, then they have a picnic in the grounds and play games, and then there's evensong where people go to the shrine and throw red roses on the shrine of St. Alban, and it's just a wonderful, happy day. Every year on Easter Monday, people from all across the diocese walk from their parish churches to St. Albans. Some of them, that's quite a long walk. They arrive into the nave, which is cleared of chairs. Everybody sits on the floor, and they have an informal Eucharist. And as they're sitting on the floor of the nave, they're looking at this screen that you see in this picture, which was only made in 2015. Well, the screen is very old, but the statues were added in 2015. And they are, this is where I might want to see if we can just make it a little bit bigger so I can tell you who they are. That's perfect. That's fine. That's great. Perfect. So on the left is Oscar Ramiro, the Archbishop of El Salvador, who was killed saying Mass because he'd been a great supporter of the poor against the regime. Next to him is a man called Alban Rowe, who was a Roman Catholic priest at a time when, in the Elizabethan period, when they were threatened with martyrdom. Indeed, he died for his faith. He's holding cards in his hand because his method of missionizing was to go into pubs and chat to people and play cards with them and tell them about the faith. Next to him is Amphibolus, the priest, who changed clothes with Alban, who's in the middle with the sword of his execution and his special cross. On Alban's other side is a man called George Tankerfield, who was a Protestant martyr under Queen Mary. And he is holding the Bible, sign of his Protestantism. He was burned to death just outside the cathedral in a place called Romeland. And next to him is St. Elizabeth Romanova. I think she's a great-great-aunt of the late Duke of Edinburgh, but she was killed by the Bolsheviks, Russian Orthodox nun. And the last one you may recognize is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the Lutheran pastor and theologian who was a leading light in the confessing church that resisted Hitler, and he was hanged in a Nazi concentration camp near the end of the war for his activities in trying to overthrow Hitler. And they all have a palm of martyrdom, just a sign that they're martyrs. Now, I need to make it small again, and then I can go on to the next one. And can we? Perfect, thank you. That's the last one anyway. So what I love about this is really the last image I want to show you. This is, of course, St. Albans Cathedral, Abbey and Cathedral under a rainbow. And what I love about the cathedral is its inclusivity. All are welcome, and visitors to the cathedral regularly include Hindus, Muslims, Jews, and people of no faith at all. I'm often there as one of the day chaplains, and you meet people from all kinds of different backgrounds saying, "Is it all right to come in?" I say, "Yes, of course." And they come in and say the prayers in their own way. Noisy toddlers are welcomed. Well-behaved dogs are welcomed. The dean says at every service, at the beginning of every service, "Welcome to your cathedral." It's always presented as a place for everyone who's there. And that spirit is just evident everywhere. There's no charge to enter, for instance, which is a really important sign of welcome, I think. It's beautifully located between the town centre and the park that leads down to the Roman site of Verulamium, where there's a museum and wonderful Roman ruins. And so because of its wonderful location, local people call in all the time just to have a cup of coffee in the cafe, or shop for a card in the cathedral shop, or just to take a few minutes to enjoy the beauty of the building. There are several kind of wow views as you come in that are just uplifting. One of the day chaplains said to me that she met a man who's a surgeon at Watford General Hospital, and he pops in his lunch hour just to sit in the Abbey before he goes back to the stress of his work. So it's meaningful for so many people. And because the ethos of the cathedral is not to come at people with answers to questions that they haven't asked, but rather just to welcome them as fellow pilgrims on the journey through life that is common to all of us, the numbers continue to grow. It's a very successful place, lots of people coming to all the services. The community life flourishes. There's a real ministry to asylum seekers in the spirit of St. Alban welcoming Amphibolus. There's outreach to families with children, to young people, to homeless people, to elderly people who might be isolated. And a building that was a focus of pilgrimage for so many hundreds of years remains very distinctly a holy place today, where worship and welcome are offered daily, and where modern-day pilgrims may find that their deepest desires are stirred up just a little, even if they're never fully satisfied in this life. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. I don't know if anybody has any questions. questions or maybe a comment from you may have made some of these pilgrimages yourself and have something to say, but yeah.
Is there another microphone that it's still connected?
Don't worry, it depends on whether...
Are connected. Okay, so you can use the central one if people want to ask questions.
Has anybody here done the Camino de Santiago? I thoroughly recommend it, as you can tell. And if you can't go there, do come to St. Albans and see us. It's much easier.
My husband has been on his motorbike. I don't think that counts.
That's called a peregrino descafeinado. They're very particular that you do it under your own steam.
Nevertheless, I found a lot of similarities between your experience and mine.
Good.
I remember numerous messages.
For the YouTube. No, come and speak to a microphone. Yeah, that's great.
As I was saying, I did the Camino twice on a motorbike, so they never gave me the credential. But I found many similarities between your expose and my experience. I remember the fountains with the clear water in all the villages. And as a thirsty biker, I would stop and fill up my bottle and have a chat with the other, or with the proper pilgrims. And we used to talk about many things.
Yeah.
And I remember my experience when I got to the place in the end. I went twice. The first time I was on my own. And there were many people, there was a lot of noise, there was a lot of incense. And for the Protestant bred person, which I was, or still am, I didn't like it. So I quickly got out and did something else. The second time with a friend, it was much quieter, not so much incense. We managed to go down to the crypt, and we had this experience. So in a way, I think I did the Camino, but in a different way.
In your own way. We all do it in our own way. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Robert, can you come to a microphone so they can hear? No, it won't on the screen, so we need you there. Yeah. For the benefit of the world listening. There you are.
I think your talk was mainly about Compostela, the Chemin in Spain. In Spain.
In Spain, yes.
Have you done any of the walks in
No,
France?
from Vézelay and places like... No, I haven't. I would love to.
Oh, you do?
But I think possibly the time for that kind of walking is over for me. But, but I am very aware of those.
Yes.
And I've sometimes visiting France and just on holiday,
Yes.
I've seen parts of the Camino, the Chemin that has started here, and I've seen the churches where people begin their pilgrimage, and I know they're very beautiful pilgrimages.
Okay. I thought you might be able to tell me which were the easy bits.
The one I hear most about is the one that begins in Vézelay, but I don't know if that's... you will know better than I, people from France, which one is the best. But,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
One question, Marjorie, if I may. Picking up on what Robert's just said, for those in later life for whom the long walk is no longer possible, is there a way of doing a pilgrimage more statically, if I mean, in terms of the spiritual benefits?
I think so. I mean, one thing that's become very popular in recent years is the labyrinth, which we, in my last but one parish, we had a labyrinth laid out on the floor of the church for a while. It's in Chartres Cathedral, it's where it is, and it's not a maze, it's not a puzzle where you go through and bump into dead ends. It's just a labyrinth that you walk through, and it takes you in and out and in and out and in and out, and you finally reach the center. And I remember how moving it was, seeing some quite elderly disabled folk in my parish kind of shuffling along, helping each other, and thoughtfully, perhaps prayerfully, reflectively arriving at the middle. And I think sometimes something like that can provide an experience of going somewhere, and it reminds you that life can take you up and down, in and out, but at the end you get to the center. So that's another possibility, I think. Or just taking a short bit of a walk, or doing it in very slow stages. I did meet people on the Camino who were in their 70s, but it would be a little bit grueling, I think, at that stage to do the length that we did. But shorter walks are possible. Things like the St. Albans pilgrimage, if people can manage maybe 5 or 10 miles in one day, that still gives you this sense of going together with others to a place where you celebrate your pilgrimage together. It's a wonderful concept, I think, whether you do it in an arduous way or a gentle way. It helps us remember our life is a journey. Yeah.
So I was just... No, just to carry on from that point briefly. So on Iona, they have the weekly pilgrimage to St. Columba's Bay, but they also have a short pilgrimage for people, obviously, who would prefer that around the village. So they make a point of having different pilgrimages on Iona. I just want
and
to
I think even things like processions in churches, and when we heard about St. Mary's Primrose Hill, where Percy Dearmer was vicar 100 years ago, very influential in liturgy and music, he was a great proponent of processions. And there's something, when I was there, we would process from the top of Primrose Hill down into the church and then around inside the church. And just a sense of walking together with people is quite profound, really. And we had a number of processions throughout the year. Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andre.
We can certainly continue the conversation over lunch. Thank you for preparation.